Fargo City Commission meeting for Tuesday, September 4th. Please come to order. Please join me in the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible. Thank you. First order of business is to approve the order of the agenda. I have one item to add to the consent agenda, item F, which is the amended resolution of offer to purchase some property on 19th Avenue. So if you would add that as F, amended resolution of offer to purchase 19th Avenue project.
Make a motion, Mayor, to approve consent agenda as stated.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. It's been moved. Is there a second to approve the order of the agenda? Thank you, Commissioner Jurdovic. Moved and second to approve the order of the agenda with the addendum of F, amended resolution to offer to purchase. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next order of business, approval of the minutes, August 20th, 2018. The minutes have been distributed. Commissioners, do you have any additions or comments or questions?
Move to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. It's been moved to approve the minutes of August 20th as distributed. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Thorstvedt. Moved and seconded to approve the minutes of August 20th. All those in favor signify by please saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much. Building permits. They also have been distributed for your review, Commissioners. Any questions or thoughts? I see that Mr. Solberg and Mr. Weil are both in the room. If you have any questions, maybe they can help us with them. What are the wishes of the Commission?
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Been moved by Commissioner Simmons to approve the building permits as presented. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Olson. Been moved and seconded to approve the building permits of the September 4th meeting as distributed. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Moving on. The consent, excuse me, we still have to approve the consent. Moving on to the consent agenda, it's on the board up there. Are there any additional items for the consent agenda by the Commissioners? What is the wishes of the Commission?
Make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Thorstvedt. Is there a second, please?
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Jurdovic. It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as presented with the addendum of F, the amended resolution to offer to purchase on 19th Avenue. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Moving on to the regular agenda. Item number 1 is a public hearing and first reading of the Maple Ridge at the Preserve 6th edition. We'll begin with the first reading, and Mr. Solberg.
Thank you, Commissioner President and Commissioners. This application was initiated by staff to correct an error in a building permit that resulted in a non-conforming structure. It was determined by staff with assistance of the city attorney that a remedy to correct the non-conformity existed in that we could replat the property and include city retention area into a new lot while maintaining a city easement on the property conveyed to protect its needs for retention. Due to the current zoning of the retention pond as public, a rezoning of the new plat is required also to ensure that the new lot would be compatible within the zoning district. Public hearing has been scheduled tonight and a first reading of the zoning ordinance is recommended. The nonconformity is that the building here was built too close to the rear property line and they're required to have a 30-foot rear property line to meet zoning ordinance requirements. Property owner caught it. It was something that the builder submitted and was an oversight when we reviewed it for a building permit. Our concern was that we get to a court and when a remedy exists and we didn't pursue that remedy, we'd have maybe an issue. So this seems to be the most logical choice. John could probably discuss that a little bit further. In regards to the person who this affects, they do relocate and they're selling their house through a relocation company. So typically something like this, a non-conformity would get caught by a mortgage company who's underwriting the mortgage loan for the property. So we felt it prudent to take care of it as quick as we can, so that's what we're doing tonight. With that, I'm available for any questions, and again, a public hearing is scheduled.
How much is the structure infringing on the right?
It's not encroaching on the right-of-way, it's encroaching into the setback by about 15 feet.
Setback, 30 feet setback, and how many feet?
They have about an 18-foot setback right now from the property line. So the plat that you have before you is probably a little bit more than will be in the final plat. The final plat will probably cut that back about 15 feet. One question that came up from our planning commission was that the property, we should ensure that the value doesn't exceed $2,500. If it did, we would have to have a public sale. It was determined by our city assessor that it had a value pretty low. That value was due to the fact that we would continue to have complete control over it for needs of retention, and it would have no access. So,
all right. Any questions of Tim?
This doesn't affect the retention pond in any way?
No.
Does this limit, even though they own the property, have the easements, but they're not going to be able to go back there and plant a garden or trees or whatever on there?
No, we would control the easement in its entirety, so any encroachment into that easement would be just like an encroachment into our own property. John, I don't know if you want to add to that, if we need to clarify that anymore, but we sure can still.
Drafted and recorded against the property would be very restrictive. Essentially, it could be green space. It's a manner in which to solve a problem regarding the setback. To be frank, the building permit likely shouldn't have been issued for the house with the setback, with the house encroaching in the setback. And so this is a way to solve the issue to make sure the home was in compliance while also maintaining the city's right to maintain the pond. So it was a good solution.
Any questions of Tim? We'll close the regular agenda and we'll move into a public hearing with regard to the Maple Ridge at Preserve 6th Edition on this issue. Is there any public comment? Is there anyone here to offer public comment? Is there any public comment? Seeing none, the public hearing is closed. Any additional questions or anything of Tim? And what is the wishes of the commission on this action?
Make a motion to put it on first reading.
Thank you, Commissioner Thorstad. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdevig, thank you. It's been moved and seconded to put this on the first reading of the Maple Ridge at the Preserve 6th Edition for the information that Mr. Soberg has provided us. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 2, Charleswood 33rd final plot approval and PUD amendment approval. Mr. Soberg.
Thank you, Your Honor and Commissioners. We received this application in order to amend an existing planned unit development. The existing planned unit development is Blarney Stone and the associated parking lot. Proposed amendment here would include a replat to accommodate this proposed office space, including a new dental office and 2 tenant spaces. Property that it would be on is currently part of that parking lot for Blarney Stone. Parking requirements were reviewed in the staff report. They'd be verified at time of permitting. This is a unique situation where there's 2 different types of uses. Both kind of work well together, office space versus the restaurant. And we can review that as part of the permit under our section 4-450 off-street parking regulations and as part of the PUD. Property owners within 150 feet and applicable agencies were notified. We have some comments from our sanitation manager that are being worked through and would be required to be resolved prior to permitting. At their August 14th regular meeting, the Planning Commission found the application to be consistent with city plans and ordinances and is hereby recommending approval with the conditions as noted in the staff report. There is no public hearing scheduled, but a representative of the applicant is here if you have any questions with them. Otherwise, I am available as well.
Are there any additional questions of Tim or the applicant? All right. Being none, what is the wishes of the commission?
Make a motion to approve the final plat approval and the PUD amendment.
Thank you, Commissioner Thorstad. Has been moved. Is there a second, please?
I'll second.
Seconded by Commissioner Olson. Been moved and seconded
With the 6 recommendations, right?
with the 6 recommendations. All right. That approval to the second?
Yes.
Thank you. Charleswood 33rd final plot approval and PUD amendment. That's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Next item, review updated plans for Dollar General. Mr. Solberg.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have in front of you just a simple sample sheet of the material as requested from Dollar General from the last meeting. I also included a memo for your review that was from the last meeting. The changes to the previous plan is after talking with Matt Marshall and myself, they were able to amend that both side elevations, the east and the west, now are at the same elevation with the increased columns and full windows on it, and the main front stays the same. So now we just have the rear of the property that is facing kind of inward to the drive aisle there, being that standard metal. The big improvement here, I think, is that east elevation changing. So I don't know what else to add to that, but I'm available for any questions. We did have a nice discussion with them, and they were willing to change their elevation a bit. So.
Mr. Solberg had provided us a color palette of the actual colors and some of the siding material, so that's what the commission's passing back and forth up here. Tim provided that to us prior to the meeting. What is your final recommendation, Tim, on the materials and what's been presented?
Well,
I promised you I wouldn't ask you that
yeah,
question
no,
in front
I
of
mean,
the commission, but I just did.
It's a matter of if the material is acceptable or not. It's a difficult ordinance. The overlay district is that it has specific things that you can and can't have. My biggest concern again is wood is a acceptable material, and I think this is superior to that. I'm happy that we were able to have them change the actual look of the elevation, so it's not that sloping metal roof and sloping metal panel. It's this hardy board. So I don't know. Maybe if I'm good at non-answers. I mean, this is what our commission is for. But
you know, in any type of codes that we have, if we don't go into the weeds on the real specifics, and certainly not on color palettes, that's very subjective to each and every individual. So, I respect that you don't want to get involved or engaged in the color palette.
Not at all.
But
that's a little wet, but
I wonder if, Your Honor, if I could, I'm sorry to do it, but ask Matt maybe if he could comment a little bit on the development around Cheyenne 32 and how this may incorporate into that. That's important to me and important to the district, I think. But
I'm sorry, Mayor. Before Matt makes his comments, I would like to make one comment that the commission keeps in mind. You know, we're putting up we made the school district go back and compromise with what they're doing. And those facilities that we're putting up out there are millions of dollars. I don't necessarily like this type of material going up across the street from something like that. I mean, and I understand where the dollar stores coming from. I'm sure they don't want to spend the extra money. But at the same time, I just think we have to look for the future too of what's going up around there. And what, you know, what, even the city, what type of investment we're putting into that location. So that's my, go ahead, I just wanted to put that out.
Yeah, so my non-answer is based on a regulatory standard. You know, I think the commission has the right to make some judgment calls on these things, and maybe Matt can touch on a little bit of that district as well, too.
Mr. Marshall.
Thank you, Commission President and Commissioners, and Tim, thank you very much. You know, we did have a great discussion with them, and the realities are that they are zoned appropriately for where they're trying to go, and we're dealing with this overlay. And Commissioner Simmons makes a great point that, you know, we have millions of dollars going to the north. That said, you know, the Hardy Board product is better than some of the alternatives they could choose that we wouldn't be able to push back on. So if they walked in tomorrow and said, you know, wood paneling on the outside, Tim would issue the permit. And so, you know, based on knowing that that could happen, you know, we feel like we compromised a lot. Originally they came in and they had just the front-facing side dressed up, and now we have three sides. And we really pushed the emphasis on articulation and using different colors to try and make it look like not a box. And so, you know, Tim's absolutely right that, you know, these overlays are difficult because it calls out specific products. For example, you can't use metal, but you can have concrete. And sometimes concrete is not better than some metals, but we just say that. And so, although I agree with Commissioner Simmons, I wish we could have better. I am a little concerned in that they go, all right, we'll just go to wood then. And the wood that we get is not as good as what we have here, and then there's not anything we can do about it.
However, I think, Matt, you were a little off base, because at the end of the day, the commission still does decide. They can't just say, I'm going to wood and go with it, I believe. We still, at the end of the day, this commission has to approve it, correct? Or am I wrong?
Well, so there's permitted uses, and then we have specific regulation, and one of the specific regulations is, and I kind of try to lay it out a little bit in that memo, is that it shall be constructed of glass, brick, wood, stone, architectural concrete, cast in place, or precast concrete panels. So if they meet that, I'd have a real difficult legal time denying it. So, I mean, you're correct in that, you know, we probably could do some things to prevent that, but we'd be preventing a lot of things. I'm probably saying more than I should, but.
So where we probably made a mistake is we should have, when we were doing these changes, we should have put right in, this is what we do not want. We won't accept this in this area for the ordinances and stuff. I mean,
We would have had to be consistent, and it'd have to apply to everybody in the planned urban
Yeah,
development.
consistency is.
And that's the critical thing that this commission has to weigh, what we're, in our deliberations tonight. You know, these people have met the standards, and those standards are what, you know, every developer is going to be expected of them. We cannot overstep that than what we've already have regulation for. So we have to be cautious also.
Yeah. So I think
unless you change your definitions of what those materials might be, and then you could exclude or add to or whatever. But we must, you know, I'd encourage the commission, if by Tim and Matt's discussions and their discussions with this development, that if they meet the standards as the city of West Fargo has them, then we have to remain vigilant and respect that. We can't expect them to ask for more than after the fact than what our regulations require.
the only thing I'd say is we're planning, or in process that we just adopted our comprehensive plan and have a new commission, and we're working on completely redoing our ordinances. So this is something that we'll be talking about. We develop so fast in this community that it's hard to get that done before each little development comes along. And Dollar General is a heck of a business, and they've been pretty good to work with on this. So I think Matt and I felt really good when we got off the phone with them and they were willing to do that, and they didn't say, forget it, we're just going to wood. They don't want to do that. They want to have a good-looking product. If there's something that we could specifically tell them that we don't like about the product, they'd probably be willing to work with us a little bit more.
We did the same thing, did we not, on 13th Avenue with the law firm? I think it was the exact material and everything, so I agree, Mayor, we can't, my point was we probably should have done it prior to, but it's too late now, it's gone and done, so.
And I would encourage you, when we're moving forward on ordinances and our comprehensive plan, if there's some refining we need to do there with regarding to build materials or like materials of other structures that are going up, then that's when we do it. But unfortunately, it's not going to be this evening.
And comparing the renderings here, what you have up on the screen, to the Dollar General that was just put up in Valley City, this is a lot of steps up from what's facing the front, street. So they've dressed it up considerably compared to other Dollar Generals I've seen.
Any additional questions for Matt or for Tim? If not, what's the wishes of the commission?
I guess I'm fine with it, so make a motion.
Commissioner Simmons moves to approve the new updated plans for the Dollar General to be on 32nd Avenue South. All those in
I'll second it.
Second by Commissioner Olson, been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item, master service agreement with Moore Engineering, discussion and approval.
Good evening, Commission President and Commissioners. I will start out and then you can ask me questions. Kevin Buckles, President of Moore Engineering, is also here if you have questions for him. I'll kind of give you a really brief synopsis of this agreement. This has been being worked on for over 2 years, and I'm very excited for it to get to this point. We've needed to have an agreement in place with Moore Engineering as our city engineering firm for quite some time. And the master service agreement itself just sets up the parameters and the fund and the costs and things like that for the work that they would provide us through different task orders. So every single project would require a task order to be written and approved, for all work that they would do. So the master service agreement just lays the whole thing out and tells us what to expect if we enter into a task order agreement with them or a request for services from them. The 3 task orders that are with that tonight, the first one is for engineering services. What that would be is to have an individual in City Hall, like we've had Dustin at City Hall for quite some time, which is nice. And the charge for that would be $10,000 a month as long as he was designated as our city engineer on site. There's a 30-day notice of termination of that agreement if we want to enter in that agreement, and if we choose to do something different, we just give them 1 month's notice. Change order, or task order number 2, lays out the additional services that Moore provides for us and what those costs are for those. That would also, before we could enter into any agreements for some of those costs, they would have to get a scope of services, it would have to get approved and ran through the commission or myself, depending on the level that it comes to. Task order number 3 is for building inspection services, which they provide us already. They're on site. And that one we started out, first of all, a couple of years ago with just a building inspection agreement. Now with the new master service agreement, it would become a task order under that. So this is just a way of moving it into a task order to fit in with our service agreement. My request for you tonight is to consider approval of the master service agreement, task orders 2 and 3, and to discuss and make a decision moving forward to hire a city engineer as proposed in the preliminary budget.
Are there any questions of Tina?
Yes. Go ahead, Brett.
Task orders 2 and 3, what about 1?
My request of you is to set aside task order 1 and to advertise and to hire our own city-employed city engineer. More Engineering would still stay as the appointed firm for the city of West Fargo, but then we would have that oversight, the person on hand. And you could also, you know, there's lots of ways to do it, like in the email I sent, you can do it where you enter into task order 1 until we get somebody hired. You could just not enter and then start advertising right away. My request is to at least have somebody in place sooner rather than later, as this has been a long-needed position, and I think we've gotten a lot of feedback from the public that they would also appreciate to have that additional person.
Thank you.
So for clarity here, basically this agreement is a price quotation. Would that be an accurate assessment? We're not bound for anything on here until we provide a task order of some sort, correct?
Correct. Until you approve a task order, there's no cost. But it just lays out the rules on who can request what. So for instance, if all of a sudden if we ask for them to do survey work and they give us a quote, we have to honor that if we've asked for it, we've accepted the scope and fee or whatever. But if we all of a sudden get a bill and we have not asked for them to perform that service, the master service agreement says we don't have to pay that bill.
So task orders are purchase orders is what they are.
Kind of, yes.
Right. So this agreement would not limit the ability of any other engineering company to provide a similar proposal, correct? It's just if we never opt to issue a task order to them, a different company, is that correct? Some of the major tasks as you're defining them are already going to be, if you get your desire, would be already assigned out, so.
Right. John can probably clarify this better, but in the agreement, there is a reduced rate that we would receive for task orders 1 and 2, which if we don't do 1, that's irrelevant, but task order 2, by having them still stay as our city engineer for construction purposes and so on and so forth. And there is a clause in there, which I know you had a question on about getting it amended. It would give them the first right, kind of like the first right of refusal, as long as they were qualified and able to do the work as our city engineering firm, they would get the first shot at it. But if we felt they weren't qualified or they felt they needed someone more qualified, they could sub-consult, or we could do an RFQ or RFP. So I don't know if John wants to clarify that better.
No, I think you explained it very well, Tina.
Okay.
You know what? Oh, I'm sorry. I'll wait till you're done.
Oh, okay.
I'll drive.
Regarding, I don't know which two of the other services, 3 is building inspection, but did we not at our reorganization meeting approve more as the building inspectors and city engineer, correct?
Yes.
So, in essence, if we approve this agreement, do we have to do something to address that differently? I mean, in other words, you're going to have, we got a city engineer, but we don't have a city engineer because we're not giving them a task order. I mean, do we have to implement that task order and then withdraw it? Do we have a certain time frame to withdraw these task orders if we opt to or they opt to?
You can.
Well, I would say as a clarification, it's a great question, Commissioner Thorstad. If you went ahead and hired a in-house city engineer, you would appoint that person as your official city engineer. More Engineering would still have an MSA with the city, so that person would be acting as your engineer. In the interim, More Engineering would still be serving as your city engineer until such time as you hired that person. So it's a little bit of what direction does the commission want to take, and then we can make the appropriate changes to the appointment following whatever the decision of the commission is.
Well, I guess that my question is, he's already in place. What would stop us from issuing task order 1? Mm-hmm. I mean, it makes sense since we're already doing it, and then if we have 30 days to discontinue that or whatever, we would do it if we decided to do something.
Yeah, that's certainly an option. The way task order 1 is drafted, it can be terminated with 30-day notice. So if you wanted to approve the MSA and task order 1, with the direction to go ahead and hire an in-house city engineer. Once you're close enough to hire that person, then you would just issue a notice to terminate task order 1.
Okay, and if I understand correctly, it would take formal action by the commission to rescind the appointments of the city engineer and the building inspection services if we opted to make a change.
Yeah.
In conjunction with whatever we opted to do at that point.
Yeah, you would issue a notice to rescind task order or terminate task order 1 and appoint whoever the person would be for your city engineer. Your building inspection services, I think that would continue unless you're hiring somebody separately to do that. I would defer to Tina whether or not you were planning on hiring that person.
No.
And the last thing I'll comment on is the non-exclusivity clause, number 18. The last sentence, I don't really agree with the wording. It says, city reserves the right to request other engineering firms to perform the work if engineers' fees are above market rates. Well, to me, that's kind of giving them an exclusivity as long as they keep below the market rate. And I would prefer that that last part of that sentence be just withdrawn or struck out, that we do reserve the right to request other engineering firms to perform work or request quotes or whatever we want to do to that effect. Because all they'd have to do is make sure, hey, we're at market rate or below, and I don't know who would determine exactly what market rate is anyway. But that would be my only suggestion, in as much as that allows us the flexibility. As far as them getting the first crack at it, if they have the first to last crack, they should certainly have the opportunity to bid on all projects. Just like others might have that opportunity as well. So
that's something that will probably
last sentence. Yeah, the last sentence is confusing to me also.
But I think that's something you go back to more and work out somehow to work that. Maybe rephrase it, or like Commissioner Thorson said.
We could approve the agreement with the change requested by Mike.
Okay. Mayor? Please. Okay. I guess my question is more to do with the Task Force 1 and then going with the Task Force 2. I know you mentioned, Commissioner Thorstad, adding in Task Force 1. Was that a concern?
Well, I think in essence we have already done that, because at our reorganization meeting in July.
Right, but I would prefer, quite honestly, to leave that out and just go with Task Force 2 and 3, and I have two kind of reasons why. Number one, we've probably worked with more engineering for 50 years, okay? If we go with Task Force, and I realize the president's sitting out there, so this isn't probably the time to say it, but I'm going to. If we go with Task Force 1, we're automatically, as of tonight, going to pay them $10,000 a month. I honestly believe that there's a lot of good faith going on, that we could probably save $40,000 by not going with Task Force 1 and just going to Task Force 2 and saying that we're going to hire our own city engineer within a couple of months, because that's our plan anyway, hopefully 3 or 4 months. Well, if we go, that's one reason why. I think I'm just guessing on that. I don't know what more engineer would charge us for, because there's no contract. So, right, correct? So I'm kind of guessing on that, and that should be.
Yeah, the other guess.
And that would be very nice, a nice gesture if they would do that, but my point is.
Kind enough that they would continue to provide the city engineer.
Right, without charging us $10,000. So there's about a $40,000 savings right there is my point. Okay, I had one more issue, but I already forgot it, so. Had to do with the task force. Yeah, you blew me away with that one.
All right, now it's my turn.
Okay.
I've spent about 5.5 hours to 6 hours on this since the new commission was elected. And we've went way into the weeds. And we've reviewed what our rate is, our hourly rate, compared to what the market rate is. And we've actually called up numerous projects and looked at the accounting of it. Mr. Buchholz and Mr. Volk have been amazing and great to work with. My recommendation is that we follow the lead of our administrator this evening. And without reservation, it has been proved to me time and again on many of these projects, and including services that they provide, that they don't bill anybody on some of these inspections and things. It is a wonderful working relationship.
And if you really see the accounting of it, the public would be amazed at what a great community partner we have with this provider. That being said, they are in total agreement that we need to change what we're doing. It's 2018, and that we need to have our own city engineer. And both the chairman of the board and the president absolutely of Moore Engineering agree with that. So out of respect for previous commission and the two commissioners that are sitting here, you guys were on the right track. Our city administrator was on the right track, and even the people providing the services to it believe we are on the right track, that it's the appropriate thing to do in 2018, 2019 for the city of West Fargo. So I didn't just do a quick perusal of this. Like I said, I know that I have at least 6 hours with President of the Moore Engineering, Mr. Buchholz, alone, plus time with the chairman of the board and Mr. Volk. So my suggestion is that we follow the lead, if at all possible this evening, if you guys can find it, that meets your approvals. Obviously, we're all one vote, but like I said, in the last 100 days, I've spent over 6 hours on this with regard to every element of it, and I was wowed. The only way to put it.
You're exactly right, Mayor. No, I guess, I don't want to say no disrespect or anything, but I put in 14 years. So I know both sides of these people. I know inside out, and I totally agree with you. Kevin is one of the best people that I'm sorry, but you're right, Tina, and I totally agree. So we need to move down this path.
And may I add, I'm not saying we have to do task order 1 as long as President Buchholz will agree that we'll continue on until we get around to issuing task force 1 or task order 1.
We have time limits, though, Kevin.
Mr. Buchholz, President of Moore Engineering.
Well, thank you guys for having me back. It's been several years since I've had the opportunity to talk before this commission, and I've cherished my 30 years of doing it, and I've lead and lived the city of West Fargo. And yes, Moore Engineering's been a part of it. I was graciously respected coming back here that they said they wanted to go for supper tonight, so I was limited to 3 minutes, I believe, is the clock that started. I'm almost as windy as Larry. First, I just want to say thank you. This relationship has been in the works for over 50 years. Our company was built on it and flourished underneath it. And I hope that we've lived up to that same expectation back to the city of West Fargo. We don't keep a ledger of wins and losses. It's what the end of the road. To your task order 1 to date, I'll say it right here. Whether you approve it or not, we are going to fulfill that commitment for the remainder of this year until you get someone built. Now, if this goes on for 5 years, there's where we've lost a little bit of our trust and faith in each other. This agreement was started in 2013, not just 2 years ago, because we recognize times are changing. Change is difficult because just change is hard for some people. We've been doing it for 50 years. Leave it the way it is. It wasn't broke. It isn't broke today. It's working. However, we do owe to the citizens a transparency, a full disclosure. We need to have... I'm all in on putting the task orders together and presenting them. I think, Mike, you're mixing a little issues. It isn't the task order 2 is just the services, it's all the other projects. We did it as a constant percentage for the city of West Fargo, so there was consistency on the assessing side. The percentage had nothing to do with the effort or the requirement or the complexity of the job. It made the assessing easier. If you want every one of them quoted and reevaluated on a per project basis, that's what we do on almost all of our clients and all of our projects. A constant percentage is not the norm on all the projects. So open to the discussion all day, every day. But there again, I appreciate the kind words, President Bernie and Mark, your guys' comments. I feel the same way. Thank you for the opportunity of serving the city for 50 years, and me personally, for I think it was 25 or 26 years that I was their city engineer, and I still say that's the proudest accomplishment of my career. Not being named the president, I look at it being the opportunity to see a community grow from 12 to 15,000 or 35,000 that I got to play a small part of. And we're going to continue that as my leadership as a president for the near future, that we're still all in on the city of West Fargo, end of the day. And we're not going to quibble over a dollar or a thing. It's citizens first, and the rest of it takes care of itself. So I'm open to any question. I'm not sure we should negotiate publicly here on all the details, but I'm not afraid of any question or conversation.
I just want to make one comment, Kevin, and as you mentioned, it's been more engineering than you, but I do have to throw in Dustin, since you went out for a while. He's done an outstanding job for the last couple of years, 3 years, whatever it's been, and he's well respected, and he represents more engineering in an outstanding way. So it's everybody there. I mean, we just got this relationship that I have full confidence in, and we like you said, it ain't broke. We're not fixing anything here. We're just trying to make it fair.
Well,
and more transparent.
We need to put it on paper. There's a lot of assumptions and misinformation, right, and we need to put it out there in today's world. And like I said, I'm glad you recognize it. Dustin in my shoes is way better than I was. He's smarter, he's faster, he has more energy.
I'm not as good looking.
I did get a haircut today, so. But no, it's there again. I'm proud that we put Dustin in here. I've handpicked him to be my successor, and I couldn't be more proud of a son or a protege. I wouldn't trade him for the world. Period.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What is the wishes of the commission?
I move we adopt the city administrator's recommendations.
That we adopt the master
agreement and task
service agreement and task order 2 and 3.
I second that.
Moved and seconded by Commissioner Simmons, and moved and seconded to approve the master service agreement with Moore Engineering, along with task order 2 and 3.
One clarification, is that with the edits from Commissioner Thorstad?
Yeah, that'd be with the edit to the exclusivity, that sentence.
Yep, second. I agree. Second has to approve that. All right, very good. Been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
In my 3 minutes were a couple of questions. There was questions too.
Item number 5 is a KPH request for waiver. John Shockley.
Good evening, Commission President, members of the West Fargo Commission. The agenda item, you may recall, the previous commission adopted an ordinance that requires that anybody seeking, any entity or any individual seeking any type of approval from the city of West Fargo must be in compliance with all of their contractual obligations, any prior approvals, any taxes have to be paid, any assessments, everything has to be up to date. This has an application across all areas of city business, including awards of contracts. KPH, and you'll see on your agenda item number 6, was a bidder on improvement district number 3002. Currently, the city engineer goes through a review of items that an engineer that a contractor has prior to recommending approval to the city commission. We identified 2 items. Number 1, in District 1308, there is an ongoing dispute with KPH regarding a contract bid bond. 1310, sorry. And then also in District 3001, their engineer identified that KPH is late in some performance of some items. I have attached in the agenda packet a letter outlining those items. Under the ordinance, it would not allow the award of the contract absent a request from KPH to waive the strict requirements of Section 1-0107. And they would have to provide specific assurances regarding, number 1, will they honor the bid on this project? So if we award the contract tonight, would they go ahead and sign it? And number 2, what safeguards could they provide regarding completing the project on time? I would note that I sent the letter out KPH has not made the formal request for the waiver, but this is an opportunity for them to make the request prior to your making a decision about the award of District 3002. And just to, for parameters, this isn't necessarily relitigating any of the old issues of the past. It's more what safeguards can they provide today to assure the performance moving forward.
Any questions of Mr. Shockley?
And I believe there's a representative from KPH in the audience.
So, John, what exactly are you asking us
I'm not making a specific request. I wanted to put it on the agenda to give KPH an opportunity. If they wanted to make the request, they certainly can. They are not required to make the request under the ordinances. They can just simply not make the request. But I felt before we made the award under 3002, an opportunity should be provided to make the request for a waiver. And if there's no request for a waiver made, we would just note that in the minutes and then move to the next agenda item.
Quick question for Dustin, on that punch list on, that was the First Avenue South project, was it not? Have they completed a lot of them? It seems like that project looks like it's closer to completion.
Yeah, my understanding is that the items have been completed. I know the final payment was issued to the contractor back in July, so that would signify to me that all these items have been complete, but I have not personally gone out there to check them off. So I can't say with any certainty, but I do know that we did make a final payment on the contract, so.
Thanks.
And the issue that was identified to me was assuring that the project would be timely completed within the parameters set forth in the bid. And maybe you just want to go over what timely performance would mean under 3002.
Well, timely performance in any project, I guess, at some point there are unforeseen conditions that can arise that constitute an allowance of or a time extension, but performing in a timely manner would certainly mean getting started as soon as we can get materials ordered, staying on track, on schedule. We require that a contractor submit a construction schedule before they start a project. So adhering to that particular schedule, again, pending any unforeseen conditions that would cause a delay, and completing this project at the time as indicated in the contract, which I believe has a completion date of October 15th. So.
Here.
Commissioner?
John, are we in litigation with them right now?
With KPH, we have currently filed a notice of default under their bond, and we're moving towards litigation. We asked if they wanted an opportunity to resolve the matter. Did recently receive some correspondence within the last day or two from their attorney, which we'd schedule that up for the next city commission meeting to talk about their response and executive.
Okay, but as of today, they're in non-compliance of a couple issues, correct? That's all. Correct. I want to know. So okay.
Correct. And that was the first item that we identified. Okay. And so the question from my perspective is, what assurances are they going to provide that they will honor this bid moving forward, given that they didn't honor?
Well, I thought we changed that ordinance, or had an ordinance that said if you're non-compliant, you can't even bid anyway.
Correct. They have to request a waiver from the commission. And it's up to you guys if you want to grant the waiver.
I mean, in my opinion, but I get what you're saying. Okay, I'm waiting for Mr. Bullis, I suppose.
Mr. Bullis.
Your Honors, Commissioners, my name is Jim Bullis, and contrary to popular belief, I am actually a full-time practicing attorney in the city of Fargo. I'm here tonight to request a waiver on behalf of KPH, and my client is back here, and I asked him if I could please, and he wanted to address the Commission, but item number one, as Commissioner Simmons clearly pointed out, is on its way towards litigation, unfortunately. I'm not a litigator, but they've hired separate bond counsel to address this matter. Item number one doesn't really have anything to do with performance under the terms of a contract. It's whether or not the contract is in force is kind of the issue. We're claiming there was a unilateral mistake in the bid. Ferguson gave us a bunch of items and they gave us a total number from their invoice, and we used it. Turns out it was wrong. And they corrected their mistake after we got the bid and said, oops, we can't honor that. reasonable lawyers will disagree here. And that's where we're at. We have a couple of different interpretations as to whether or not that is an excusable mistake under the contract or not. Item number 2 has substantially been completed and been corrected pursuant to its contract terms. I believe there is a little bit of contract or concrete, an apron that still needs to be poured. That's just pending on weather from the last couple of weeks.
Correct, yeah, and that's where some of this stuff, in terms of a contract, some of the additional work that still needs to be done out there is under warranty. So and we have a 1-year warranty on a project, so anytime in the next year, there might be something that has to go, back into a replacement mode.
Yeah, right, and this was work that was done, but it broke up over the course of the winter, and it'll be replaced. Most of it's been done. There is, I believe, one item though left undone. So we are here tonight asking for a waiver in that number 1 does not have anything to do with the work performed by KPH. It's rather a contract interpretation question. Number 2 has been addressed, and we believe pursuant to its contract terms. And I'll try and answer any questions I can that don't involve litigation, if you so desire.
I actually had 2 questions. Once again, it's not about relitigating the past. I think the 2 questions are, number 1, how will KPH agree to move forward with accepting the bid without any additional problems? Are they going to provide safeguards to the city to provide assurance that you'll accept the bid without rejecting it? Number 2, what are the safeguards to assure timely performance? And we can certainly reduce that to writing, but those are the 2 things that need to be addressed to demonstrate to the commission how are you going to complete on time. Are you going to accept the bid?
And I don't know specifically if the bid required a bid bond or not. I presume it did. And again, I guess what we would say is we bond for it like any other job. And to the extent that there are liquidated damages that are assessed against KPH, it has the financial wherewithal to perform. If that's the case, I don't think it's necessarily a secret that one of the principals of KPH is financially involved in the project that we're talking about, and has been involved in a number of West Fargo development projects. And I think that he has all sorts of motivation to get this done on time, in that he is as interested as the city of West Fargo in making sure it's done on time and on budget.
Anyone else?
So all the items in Exhibit 2 were not done by the end of the construction, or all those items in 2 pages?
Right, well, in general, the construction project for District 3001 was significantly past the completion date.
You define significantly past.
That's what I was just looking up to make sure I understand the exact amount of days. There was some discrepancy on where we were on, in terms of where the completion date was, which was August of 2017 versus when everything got completed, which was this spring. It was, 80-some days late, but that's where, working through what is an acceptable extension, I believe we worked it down to about 45 days, if I recall. But that's where I don't have that exact day in mind.
Fine. They've all been corrected, taken care of, everything in Exhibit 2? Or is there anything else outstanding still that needs to be?
No, everything in Exhibit 2 has been addressed, as far as I'm aware. There are a couple items that need to be done in terms of a warranty claim. So, a cracked concrete panel here, or something like that. Or if there's the seeding, for example, if the grass isn't growing the way it's supposed to within that first year, those are the kinds of things that you go back on a warranty claim.
Dustin, were there any penalties for a late project, and if there were they paid? Is that part of the contract?
Were there penalty clauses in the contract?
Yes. And that's, again, I apologize, but I'm trying to reference what those penalties were. So if it was 45 days, it was $1,000 a day, so $45,000 was withheld from the final payment.
Okay, so they accepted that and did not dispute that.
Correct.
Am I getting confused here, John? I want to make sure I'm on the right page. Is this the same business that we went into executive session over?
Yeah,
This
and,
is out of kindred. This is, I got it in my mind right? This is the right people. We haven't,
correct.
okay,
And
that's all I need to know.
And it's 3001, First Avenue? Is that what we're talking about when we're referring to 3001? Thank you.
Avenue is 3001.
Thank you.
And just for clarification, it's really the two issues, and it's forward-looking. It's not necessarily what was done in the past. It's what assurances are they going to give that they perform on time? I suppose, without speaking for KPH, I suppose one solution would be, normally we retain a certain amount, that we would, potentially increase the retainage until the project is completed, or increase the bid bond, because we're just looking for assurances that the same issues aren't going to be repeated again. That's kind of what that's when a party requests a waiver, it's their burden to demonstrate how are they going to assure that those past failures don't repeat themselves. This isn't, our goal is not to try to relitigate any type of past claims, it's just to assure future performance from the requester.
And the commission has that authority, or?
That's how it is structured under the
Mr.
ordinance.
Bullis, you had a point you wanted to make, I think.
Well, I did, and I guess my point would be that, with regard to performance or making sure that they have that ability to pay this, whether they retain 10% or 15%, even though they were late under 1301 or 1302, I guess, or 3001, they paid it. They accepted the $45,000 late payment and paid it to the city.
And just a correction, it was 88 days, so $88,000. Which they accepted.
Yeah, they accepted and paid, and they have that financial ability. So I don't know that necessarily additional retainage is warranted or necessary, because you still have the checkbook. So
I understand that, but as a candidate for the commission and now as a commissioner, I've not had more calls than First Avenue than this. Today was my 5th phone call on First Avenue. Still issues. Just a point of reference. As early as, or as late as of today. Anything else, Mr. Shockley, Mr. Scott, that you have to offer? All right, thank you. Mr. Bullis, anything else? Thank you.
I just, again, we're here requesting a waiver, and we'll abide by the commission's requests for additional security or whatever your decision is.
Item number 5 is KPH's request for a waiver, as Mr. Shockley has pointed out to us, we can apparently assign some other additional conditions if we warrant them. So I would ask what the pleasure of the commission is.
I think it's time, honestly, we just cut our losses and move on. I don't want to work with it anymore. So my motion would be to deny the waiver.
The chair will not accept that motion. You're not ever supposed to accept a negative motion.
What?
In parliamentary procedure, you guys have been doing it for years, but true rules are...
Mayor Dartis, come on now. I've never heard of that in my life. You can make a...
No, you can't. Make a motion to the waiver,
John?
and it will fail. Negative motions in the Roberts Rules of Order are not appropriate.
Well, you could make the requested action would be to deny the request because they made a request.
That's a different thing.
Yeah. So you'd make a motion to deny the request.
The language. So I'll make the motion to deny the request.
Is there a second?
Is
there a second to deny the request for KPH request for waiver? Is there a second? Is there a second? Motion fails due to the lack of a second. What is the wishes of the commission? If there's no motion, we're not going to take action on this evening, and I guess I don't know what else to do with it.
Mayor, if there's no motion, then it's considered dead and gone away, and you can't bring it back, correct? That's Robert's rules as well.
I guess, Mayor, I was trying to come up with the right word. Now, I'd move to give them this opportunity, but I want to make sure there's a certain amount of assurance from the city's standpoint that they don't cut and run. I guess we talked about the bond. We already got one of those in in action, but I want to make sure, whether it's holdbacks or through penalties or whatever, we have some recourse if they fail to perform again.
I would, if that's the way the commission would like to go, I would suggest on the bid bonds side, it's a small project and the 5% retainage, given the difference between the KPH bid and the next bid, 5% would likely cover that. So I'm not as concerned in that area. I'm more concerned about their ability to perform within a timely manner. So I would suggest that you would increase the retainage from the normal, it's a 10% retainage. I would suggest increasing that to 40% retainage so that they would not, all retainage would be increased to 40%. If they're able to perform in a timely manner in this project, then you could revisit that on the next project they would bid, but that would assure that they would have some motivation then to finish the project on time. On a normal contract, the engineer will make progress payments, so if they complete $100,000 of work, they get $90,000. The engineer holds back 10%. I would suggest one way of assuring compliance is to increase the amount of retainage.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley.
I will make a motion as recommended by the city attorney at 40% retainage on the project.
Could I have the project number again?
It is 3002.
But I will state publicly that we're giving them an opportunity to correct what I view as previous wrongs. Let's not have any problems in the future.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. It's been moved and seconded for a KPH request for waiver for project number 2002, that there be a retainage of 40% for this project. And future projects would be reviewed after this is completed. Been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion carries. Thank you. We're going to interrupt our meeting at this time because we have some very special guests that have just joined us. And I would like to call on Chief Keith Yonke to introduce to you the 4 newest police officers for the city of West Fargo. Chief?
Thank you, Commission President and Commissioners. We just had a swearing-in ceremony over in our training room where we just sworn in these 4 brand-new patrol officers with the West Fargo Police Department. Historical evening for us. We just swore in our 60th sworn officer, so we've just reached 60. Shows the incredible growth. On my right, we have James Ellison, Brent Young, Jacob Zach, Adam Suffolk is our 4 new patrol officers that just received their badges. So we wanted to bring them straight down to introduce them to you, and they will be honorably serving and protecting our city moving forward.
Welcome. Good to have you.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome aboard. Thank you. Welcome aboard. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
I'm going to talk to Chief about you. Welcome, guys.
Next item on the agenda is review the bid tab for infrastructure replacement, district number 3002. Dustin Scott.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, members of the Commission. Well, in light of the previous item, at this point, I'm going to move forward and recommend awarding this contract to KPH for their base bid and alternate one amount of $174,598.00, along with the modification to the contract that we use a 40% retainage until 90% of the work has been completed.
Any questions of Mr. Scott?
What is the wishes of the commission?
Make a motion to approve.
A second.
Moved by Commissioner Thorsted, seconded by Commissioner Olson, that the bid tab review of the infrastructure replacement of District Number 3002 go to KPH with the retainage issue as previously discussed. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is item number 7, City Administrator's Report. Ina?
Good evening again, Commissioners. I'll be quick, and then Matt's getting up to talk about us becoming a Main Street city, and he also will be quick. Well, maybe not. Anyway, I just want to remind you, we had a special assessment committee meeting a couple of weeks back, and through that, there were a few members from Hayden Heights that had questions, detailed questions on their assessments, and then we were directed to set up a meeting with them. Staff will be holding that meeting with those people at 5:30 tomorrow night. And then the Special Assessment Committee will reconvene on Thursday night at 5:30. Also, I will, at our next meeting, be bringing forward the enterprise funds, the water, sewer, sanitation funds, with any rate changes, so on and so forth, to review with you, as well as the final budget for review for changes. So, if you have any questions of me, or you want to sit down and talk about any of those items beforehand, let me know.
I'd like you to schedule a meeting with myself. I'd like to review it with you.
Okay, that'd be good.
Thank you.
Okay, now it's up to Matt.
Thank you, Commission President and Commissioners. I'm here to talk to you today about becoming a Main Street community. Governor Burgum, as you may have heard, has what's called the Main Street Initiative. It focuses around some pillars. They call them 4 tools: healthy, vibrant communities, 21st century workforce, smart, efficient infrastructure, and resources and assistance. The intent is to, educate communities on, the long-term cost of infrastructure and try and build an ideal around, how to increase taxable value and create unique places. As you know, we just received a grant from the governor's office to redo our Cheyenne Street. I think it's appropriate to, at this point, take that step and become a Main Street community, embrace some of the ideals. If the commission is okay with it, the mayor has offered to propose a proclamation or proclaim us a Main Street community. The governor himself will come here on the 21st to hold a Main Street summit, and the commission president and Callie and I are working on the agenda for that as well, and all of you will be invited. It's a very simple process. You fill out a quick survey, and then sort of just a quick write-up on what the vision of your downtown is, which I fully intend to just take out of our comprehensive plan, which has already been done 3 times, so not reinvent the wheel there, and send that off to them. What I have in front of you are some quick bullets about the Main Street community, or what it means to be a Main Street community, and then just our take on the survey, which some of these you could argue they're absolutely mostly are fair. They didn't give you any room for explanation, so we just sort of picked what we felt was appropriate in some of these categories. With that, I'm open to any questions, but I would like a motion and to confirm.
I think, Matt, I don't know if I agree with your answer in a couple of these. For instance, paths or lanes are maintained to encourage biking. You put not at all. We put a lot of money into paths the last number of years for biking and walking and... Not on Main Street.
Yeah, so I agree with you. So we took this as they wanted to talk about Cheyenne Street. So we talked about, citywide generally, and to your point, you are correct. And we can change anything because this hasn't been submitted. We just picked... what do we look at this? Cheyenne Street? Is it citywide? We certainly do have bike paths, but
my little more clarity. I guess they say a Main Street community. To me, the community is the whole thing.
That doesn't mean Main.
It doesn't
Main
say
Street.
your Main Street have these features.
I'm in. I'll change that to absolutely. That's
Yeah,
an
we
easy
need
one.
that change.
I know we put a lot of effort into it citywide. I agree downtown, we need some more.
We're a
Yep.
Main Street community.
Start walking.
One of the things I've.
Okay.
You guys.
Yeah, that's easy. I got,
We need to
The concept of.
these are our first blush on the survey, so you pick what you want to say.
Same with sidewalks, we somewhat are constructed and maintained to encourage walking. And I think we've got a lot of new sidewalks,
Sure.
so.
Are you putting this in for the grant or just as knowledge to the?
No, this, and they just, it's a,
Registration process.
yeah, sort of a registration saying we acknowledge that, the thought process behind the Main Street community is valid, and we're gonna do our best to, get on board, basically. It doesn't hold us to anything. This doesn't say that you have to decide one way or the other.
I guess I'm just saying, I wouldn't also, and if you just said that, I don't know, but as far as the path and lanes go, paths for biking, I wouldn't put not at all on there, because a lot of this money, I would think, is gonna be directed towards biking and walking. That's kind of the end theme. You know that, Matt.
Oh, yeah, I think the survey, and the way we took it was, how's your downtown today? And so we looked at it with that narrow scope. To your point, to widen it to citywide, you'd get a lot different. They didn't give a lot of direction either. And
This is
so
like
that's
Tree
why
City.
we were kind of laughing when we were doing it, because we're like, I don't know, pick this one, see what happens. Again, it's not binding you to
Be careful,
anything.
that's all, yeah, so you don't.
Maybe we could make a call to Jason.
Yeah,
To, get some clarity on this as to, but, the assumption would be, and I certainly agree with Commissioner Simmons and Commissioner Thorstead that, these answers are not, putting us in a very good light, but the reality of it is that the project is for Main Street, and this is what the governor's initiative has been, all across North Dakota. I've attended his meeting on his Main Street initiative in Jamestown, Bismarck. I was at one more, I don't remember where it was at his invitation. And so when we received this grant, we immediately reached out to the governor and said, well, we have not applied for this designation, and we thought it would be appropriate that being we were getting such a generous grant from them, that it might be time that we become the poster child, because what you folks have done on Cheyenne Street absolutely makes us the poster child for a Main Street initiative. There's no question. So that's why I encourage Matt and Tim and Larry to do this. So Matt would like a motion with regard to the Main Street community designation that we move forward with this, and at our invitation, the governor is coming to town on September 21st, and the details will be following. So if you could,
I'll make that motion.
thank you, Commissioner Simmons, Commissioner Olson, and moved and seconded that the city of West Fargo embrace the Main Street community designation.
thank you,
Thank you, Matt.
appreciate it.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Any correspondence? Anyone? Tina, do you have anything for us? All right. With that, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Moved and seconded to adjourn by Commissioner Jurdevig. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you for your time.